Among the lessons that institutions learned from the COVID pandemic is the importance of coordinating preparedness and response efforts. That's placed renewed focus among federal health organizations, including HHS, CDC, NIH, and FDA, among others, on the need for reliable, high capacity, and flexible network environments. I'm Wyatt Kash with Scoop News Group, and here to talk about the progress federal organizations are making and lessons learned in modernizing their network environments are Farhan Khan, Director of the Office of Technology and Delivery in the FDA's Office of Digital Transformation, Lamont Copeland, Managing Director of Federal Solutions Architecture at Verizon, and Westdorp, Chief Technologist at Ciena Government Solutions. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And Farhan, I'd like to start with you. Talk a little about the central challenges of preparing for public health emergencies and what that requires of health agencies, particularly with their data centers and their networks, to make sure they've assembled and are able to share data quickly and efficiently.
Thanks, Mike. That's a great question. So before I answer your question, let me just tell you what my role is at FDA. My job is to manage and provide application footprint to the FDA users. Plus, I am responsible for managing data center operations. And when it comes to data center, within the data center, there are three most important things. Number one is the data that is stored on servers and other devices. Number two is basically the network itself, to make sure that the applications can talk to each other, applications can send data from point A to point B. So when it comes to network, it is critically important because without the network, we cannot share data, we cannot pass data, we cannot connect back to the network. And the way I see our network is that it connects, it allows the applications to connect with each other and transfer and transmit data between devices over here. Plus, it allows our users to connect into the network to be able to access that data. So now let's look at users getting access to the data. So we are still, remote, most of us, we work remotely. So the first thing that is critically important is to give our users a robust network infrastructure to be able to connect back into the mothership, into the network that we have here. And so, Wi-Fi is available everywhere, and all of that. But then we need to do that in a secure fashion. So we are right now, we are trying to implement zero trust architecture within our environment, and Zscaler is an important part. So we are trying to implement Zscaler. We have these VPN tools that we use to allow people to connect back into the network. We are also, to some extent, testing VDI, so that the end goal here is that users should be able to connect back into the environment through multiple ways, right? So we should have redundancies, we should have diverse paths to allow people to connect back into the network. The second layer is actually like to make sure that, when it comes to site connection, we should have redundancy over there, so that if one connection goes down, there should be a second one, because this connectivity is like we do not have a choice to be disconnected from the network or disconnected from each other. So in the health organizations, someone like when I interviewed for FDA many years ago, I asked this individual explained the function of FDA in a very nice way. He said, we generate data, we deal with data. So data is everything for us. We collect data from everywhere, from all over the world. So making sure that we are able to collect this data and we are able to use this data to support public health mission is critically important. So the network that you're talking about is critically important for FDA and for the mission of FDA. Now, one last thing I would like to add here is the internal network, how we connect. So we are, of course, we have, these typical devices, routers, switches, and all of those things, but now we are moving towards software-defined networking. And we are trying to explore other methodologies and tools and hardware that is like from Cisco and all these other companies to really understand how we can modernize and how we can become more agile when it comes to network connectivity.
Well, Lamont and Jim, I think Farhan raises some really important points about, how to modernize networks. Talk to us a little about how and why network as a service solutions can offer agencies a faster and potentially more flexible approach to modernizing their networks. So, Lamont, maybe you could start.
Yeah, no, thanks, Wyatt, and thanks for having us on the call today. One of the main things is making sure that agencies like FDA and everyone else that's supported by our networks as a service is able to then provide that connectivity, like Farhan is saying, between the applications themselves, the data centers, the site-to-site connectivity, and then move up this stack to be able to then provide things like SASE and SDN and all these other capabilities to be able to then get this and have it be able to manage so they can then focus on what the mission is that they're trying to work through, delivering services out to their end customers and really focusing on what they're there for day to day and not really focus heavily on the network itself and how to deliver out the network, how to maintain the SLAs around that service level agreement, how to maintain the up connectivity and always having it there. The key part is making sure that it's there, making sure that the things that the industry is really good at is focusing heavily on how do I make sure that service is always there so that they can drive that mission across the network and provide that connectivity and use some of the newer technologies that are going to come into play, because we're talking about things like 5G, AI. How do I then use these to connect that data and get the insights that are necessary for those end users to work on what they have on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, Lamont, I agree. It's really, to my mind, it's really about efficiency and scale. Providers such as Verizon, when they offer network as a service solutions and using equipment underpinning that network from Ciena, they're driving networks that are of a scale and of flexibility that is really huge, and it allows much more efficiency to be provided and lower cost overall solutions to be provided to agencies like FDA. So the massive scale and flexibility of the large carrier networks really allows the needs of the end user agencies like FDA, et cetera, to be handled more cost effectively and really more flexibility. You can get better services than you'd be able to do or be able to afford, really, if you do it yourself.
And then Farhan, what do you see as some of the inherent benefits of adopting some of these newer and more modern high-speed network solutions, such as 5G, but also mobile edge computing to support mobile healthcare today?
So before I answer that question, I would like to comment on what Lamont and Jim said. I mean, flexible networks and network as a service. I think that's a very critical area. We need to explore this some more over here, because within FDA, we are trying to adopt cloud first model. And cloud forward, one thing that it provides is agility, that scalability when it comes to servers, when it comes to provisioning resources, when it comes to backups and all those things. But then there's another important part. How do we connect to that cloud? And that is the network as a service. So be able to scale up and down. That flexibility is critically important, because if we want to use the cloud, and basically use the power of the cloud, which is scalability, we need to improve in these three areas. Number one is, of course, we need to have cloud adoption and accelerate cloud adoption. Number two, network as a service is definitely going to help. And then number three is the budgeting, right? So we need to basically transform in all these three areas to be able to harness the power that cloud provides. So that is critically important. But coming back to your question, high-speed network, 5G, all of those things. Again, we have now devices, computers, sensors, and all those things that generate so much data. And we do need that data to connect all the dots. So, I mean, information is just not from one human to another human. It's like humans, machines, sensors, all of those things are generating data. And in order to make the right decision, we need all of that information. We need to connect all the dots, and we need to be able to then see how it is going to help us with the decision-making process. So, and with AI devices and AI technologies and all that, this data is far more important for us. And then it's very important for us to basically transfer this data from point A to point B. Again, this data is not sitting in one place. It is in multiple places, and we need to collect all that data. So it is critically important for us to use technologies like 5G. Like we need to have the agility that software-defined networking provides. We need to have the flexibility that network as service provides. So to basically connect all of these dots and collect the data in one location, or even if it's edge computing, still be able to get our hands on that data, use that data to get key insights and then move forward with it.
Good points. And then Lamont and Jim, what additionally do you feel are agencies maybe missing about the opportunities of 5G and mobile edge computing that, if they better understood it, they would embrace it faster to help them modernize? Lamont, again, I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, and it's really on how you're going to enable those applications. And just like Farhan said, having that ecosystem of folks talking to one another, whether it's devices to devices, people to devices, people to people, or anywhere in between. How are you going to get that data from point A to point B? And how are you going to get it from those sensors to a large language model, to a database, to be able to then provide the insights that are necessary to answer whatever question, deliver on whatever mission set that's going to be able to happen. And the way that technology is moving now is moving closer and closer to the edge because of the mobility of the user itself, to be able to meet inside of a metro city anywhere to be able to deliver those services, or meet out in a rural area, because we are a spread nation. I know a lot of people look at what's happening inside of like a New York City or Washington, D.C., but there are things that are happening that we have to deliver out in even Boise, Idaho, to be able to support that end user. And that connectivity piece and providing that network and network as a service to get that data moving back and forth is critical, and how it works at the edge for the compute, and how it works getting that connectivity back to the brick and mortar type cloud services, and where those applications are, and having that work in a large ecosystem is really critical and key. And that's why it's important. How do you deliver that with the different network modalities of 5G, the MEC, the cloud itself, and then the underpinning of the wireline infrastructure, because all this wireline and wireless work together. And that's how, when Verizon and Ciena get together to be able to deliver these services, it works from our spectrum down to the fiber to the boxes that are all connecting those things back and forth.
Yeah, there's a whole class of applications that are enabled by high speed, high capacity transport. I mean, look at how we're doing today's session, right? We're all sitting on various forms of video calling, which are fairly high bandwidth, applications. And when you look at the applications that are riding over 5G, just even the overall infrastructure has migrated from relatively low speeds. The edge used to be 10 meg, and now it's 100 meg, a gig. In some places it's 10 gig or even 100 gig, which used to be the provenance of the core, is now becoming more of an edge. Granted, a metro edge, a high-speed edge, but still an inexorable increase in bandwidth that we're seeing. And most of the applications that we take for granted today wouldn't work without broadband, high-capacity edge networking. And then the network as a service that underpins it all.
And Wyatt, if you don't mind, may I add one more thing?
Yeah.
So in the past, like 5 years ago, I think this concept of always connected was probably not there. It was like, everyone wanted to be connected all the time, but now it's a requirement, it's a necessity, right? In the past, it used to be wired or wireless. Now, FDA is looking into like, we are wired, fine, wireless is fine. What about satellite? So we have a site where we have a primary connection, of course, wired, and we have a secondary connection. But then now we are also looking into things like Starlink to make sure that we are always connected. And we are trying to make sure that we have diverse paths. So if there is vendor A that's providing the primary connectivity, the second thing is to have a different vendor, a diverse path to provide a secondary connectivity, and then satellite, right? The speed is not going to be that great, but end of the day, we cannot lose connectivity. And that is the key. Right now, we are focusing on all those three areas: wireless, wired, wireless, and satellite, all three.
Well, and Farhan, just to build on that, can you share maybe a brief example of how FDA or its employees or its partners are now benefiting from this more modern access to wireless capabilities and network flexibility?
So I would like to address this from a different angle. As we say, it's always people, process, and technology, and technology cannot solve all problems. So when it comes to to the network, to the connectivity, to providing this, whether it's wireless, wired, or whatever technology we're talking about here. We are not the only ones here in the universe. There are a lot of other players. Everyone has pretty similar needs, right? So what we are doing is we are looking at technology, but at the same time, we are trying to figure out how we can leverage other networks hosted and provisioned by other agencies. Of course, security is our prime, is always our primary concern. We need to make sure it's secure for our FDA users. But end of the day, other agencies in the .gov domain, they have done an amazing job in setting up their network. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to establish relationships with these agencies, and we are trying to find ways to leverage their networks, right, in a secure fashion. That's number one that we are trying to do. Number two is we are, again, as I said earlier, we are trying to look into software-defined networking. We are trying to modernize our wireless access points. We are trying to, the zero trust architecture and all those things. We are trying to establish those kind of things to basically ensure security. At the same time, we are trying to streamline the connectivity that we have between our different points. Like, for example, we have a requirement to go through the TIC. So we are trying to figure out how we can basically do cloud to cloud or TIC to cloud and those kind of connectivities to further streamline how we would talk to different applications, devices, and sensors that basically reside all over, this ecosystem, whether it's cloud, whether it's edge computing and all that. So that is what we are trying to do.
Really appreciate that. And in our final minute or so, Lamont and Jim, can you just briefly touch on, so how are partnerships between organizations like Ciena Government Solutions and Verizon helping federal agencies, accelerate these modernization efforts?
Yeah, I can start out here, and a lot of it is really how we're looking at this, all the technology that we have available to us, with how the boxes, the fiber, the spectrum, the radio heads. How do we then take these and architect these into a network which is flexible enough to be able to meet the demands of today, to be able to figure out how do we get the data moving from point A to point B, but also is able to work in a priority state too as well, and be able to deliver bandwidth on demand, be able to deliver capabilities that are necessary either in a time of crisis or a time of just a surge need in that type of instance. And that's where we're coming and looking at all the technology capabilities that we have together jointly as a Verizon and Ciena to build these networks out, to then deliver on the larger environment and larger mission set that we're trying to do. So really it's looking at how do we take this technology and deliver out solutions which deliver against the outcomes of the agencies themselves, and not just talking about it individually products, but how do we deliver these things to deliver solutions to the outcomes that is necessary.
Yeah, and from Ciena's perspective as an equipment and technology provider to Verizon, we've been striving really over the last decade or more really to make our equipment and the services that are hosted on the equipment, highly capable, always increasing the capacity, and in particular to make the equipment amenable to implementing discrete services. So we put tremendous effort when we build our equipment and the software associated in making it so that the various services that are hosted on our equipment and that Verizon can support can be partitioned at a variety of different layers. So if a particular customer needs a dedicated Ethernet service in a particular place, and they don't want to mix their traffic with anybody else, that there's those kinds of controls in place that allow that separation of service, so that even though there's a holistic combined service or network which Verizon is operating, you can partition that network in ways that give unique capacities and unique capabilities to the network as a service customers, so that it looks to them like they have a dedicated network, even though it's operating over converged infrastructure. And there's a lot of things that we've done to enable that, and that Verizon takes advantage of.
Well, certainly as we move towards more zero trust applications at work in government, try to involve artificial intelligence to help automate certain things, and we continue to try to build better services for the public, it sounds like all of those services will be increasingly important. Well, Farhan Khan at FDA, Lamont Copeland at Verizon, and Jim Westdorp at Ciena Government Solutions. Thank you all for joining us and sharing your respective insights on network modernization with our audience. So thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Wyatt.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.